Hey, everybody. Welcome to our second, I think, uh, ever virtual series of Garden Gateway nutrition events, workshops. My name is Devin Hamilton. I'm the executive associate at CSU, and I'm actually here in my home kitchen. I'll let Heather introduce herself as well and where she's at.
Hi, Heather here with CSU, Co-Executive Director, and I'm here at the Village Marketplace in our commercial kitchen here at the Food Hub. So we're a nonprofit based here in South Central Los Angeles, and we do education and training programs using food as a focal point to talk about health, the environment, culture, nutrition, and all the things that are important around building healthy lives and a healthy community. We also operate a social enterprise called the Village Marketplace. And if folks know, we have our Paul Robeson Community Wellness Center and the Village Marketplace Food Hub over at 66 in Vermont. And the focus of that is increasing access to healthy, affordable, local food, and also creating jobs here in South LA. And so our market is actually closed for walk-in customers right now, but we are doing online ordering and delivery. And like so many, we're moving our education programs online. And so Garden Gateway is a program that we've operated for about 10 years. It's a home gardening and healthy cooking series, training education series. Typically, we offer it on our farm at the Expo Center. But again, since quarantine, and we have shifted virtually. So if this is your first time checking in with us, we hope that you'll check out some of our other virtual content. I'll just jump in with the topics that we're covering. And so today we're focusing on two of those, pickling and fermenting. And I'm going to be doing a fermentation recipe. So I'll get started with that one first. So before we had refrigeration and all of that, fermentation, pickling, preserving, there were a lot of different ways that we had to preserve our foods so that it would last for us. And so fermentation is a process by which you basically create an ideal environment for good bacteria to grow in your food, and then it preserves it. The bacteria, the good bacteria preserves it and prevents the bad bacteria basically from coming in. And what it does is it creates all these great micronutrients and probiotics and live bacteria that are good for digestion and good for your immune system, much like you hear, yogurt has probiotics. And so this is just a way of doing that kind of fermentation, creating probiotics with your vegetables. So today we're doing it with sauerkraut. We're doing it with cabbage. This is a really traditional kind of Eastern European dish, and that's where my people come from. And so that's what I was focusing on. But you can do this kind of fermentation with really any kind of vegetable. You can ferment carrots, you could ferment cucumbers, peppers, you could ferment anything, but we're just doing this with cabbage today. And so what I did first was I took a whole cabbage and I just peeled off. You can see all these outside leaves that were kind of, ugly and wrinkly and dried out and such. And then actually what I'm gonna do is once I get to those really nice waxy leaves that are there in the inside, I'm gonna peel off two of these really nice ones, kind of gently. And I'm gonna set those aside and keep those for later when we actually set this up. So I've got this kind of nice leaf. I'm gonna set that aside. I'm gonna do two of those. And we'll get back to how we're gonna use those later. Okay. All right, great. All right, so now I've got my nice cabbage. What I'm gonna go ahead and do is just cut it in half. And here I have one that I already cut in half. And you see I've got that big stem bit that's in there and I need to remove that. So what I'm gonna do here is cut it again, right down the middle. And now you see I've got it kind of on this corner. I'm just gonna come in and remove that out. And I've got a little bowl here where I'm throwing all my compost and my trimmed away bits, so it's easy for me to throw that into the compost later. You can see here, I'm doing that again. Now you could do this with a green cabbage or a red cabbage. I like using the red cabbage because you get the added nutritional benefits of the antioxidants from the red cabbage. But in general, cabbage is really good for you, lots of fiber, lots of potassium. potassium, high in vitamin B. So you're getting all these great nutrients from the cabbage. And then if you pick a red or a purple cabbage, then you've got the antioxidants as well. Okay, so now that I've got my 2 pieces, I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna shred these. And this is really a matter of preference, how thinly you shred it. You could do it, you know, an inch thick or so and have, if that's kind of how you like to eat it. Sometimes people like to shave it super, super thin. And so that's really up to you. You could even, and some folks do, make more of like a fermentation brine and ferment like this whole chunk, right? So you can ferment. And so this would be the same even if you're doing some other kind of vegetable like carrots. You could cut into sticks, or you could grate it, similar with cucumbers or anything else. So me, I've got this nice knife, and if you've got a sharpener in your kitchen, keep that handy, and always remember to sharpen your knives. Sorry, that's not a great sound, but sharp knives are not only more efficient in terms of your energy, but they're safer. It seems maybe counterintuitive because a sharp knife seems a little more dangerous, but when you're cutting through your food more, more directly, you're not like doing this and kind of more likely to bounce around and have any kind of trouble. So I like mine to be not super thin. I'll hold up, let's see, I'll cut a little strip here and hold it up. So it's about maybe a 1/4 inch thick. And if you want, like I said, you could shred it even thinner or make it thicker. If folks have eaten kimchi before, which is a fermented cabbage, you mostly with cabbage, traditional Korean dish, and oftentimes that's a lot thicker in terms of how it's cut. So I'm going through here and I'm shredding it all up. Just taking my time. And then when I get actually this little back bit here, I like to lay it down flat on the table so I can go through, and that last little bit I can make sure I've got the thin bits. You do want to try to focus as much as possible to have it be consistent so that all of the food as it's fermenting is fermenting at a similar pace. You see here I dumped it into this big bowl, and it will stay together. So I'm kind of using my fingers to separate those bits. Get that all loose. I'm going to do this last little piece. So the recipe that we're doing is for using 1 head of cabbage, which is about, you know, a pound, about 2 pounds probably. You could do probably about up to 5 pounds in one batch, if you like. That would still allow for enough, you know, the process, right? Much more than that, it gets to be too much, and the fermentation process could get interrupted. Now you see I'm using a plastic bowl. You could also be using glass, but I'm not using a metal bowl. And generally, when you start to ferment things, you don't want to use metal because the acids that'll be created once things start to ferment can react with the metals. And so you can use plastic, you can use glass, or you can use like ceramic. It's also an option. So I've got this here. I've loosened it all up. Okay, and now I'm going to add the salt. And the salt is going to pull out the moisture and the natural sugars from the vegetable, and that is it's going to create the brine that is going to that the fermentation is going to happen in. To a degree, it is a matter of taste. However, if you use too little salt, then the fermentation process won't activate, and your food will spoil before it actually ferments. And if you use too much, the salt water can inhibit the fermentation process, inhibit the probiotics that need to come to life in here. So there is a bit of a balance. What we have here in our recipe is we say 1.5 tablespoons. For a good sized cabbage, you could probably do somewhere between 1 and 3. We are doing it on a little bit on the less side. So I would start with the recipe that we're giving you, and then you could always add salt, you know, in the future when you do it. So what I'm doing now is just sprinkling it all across the top. I'm going to do 1 tablespoon first, and then I'll do about 1/2 there, sprinkling it all around. Okay, So there you go, you can see that. And now I'm in just my hands, already stained red from that beautiful cabbage. Your most important tools in the kitchen, in the garden, and everywhere are always your hands. And so I'm now gonna come in and massage this cabbage, mixing it and pressing the salt into it. I'm gonna kick it over here to Devin in a minute, and I'm gonna do this for a solid 8 to 10 minutes. And already, even though I've only been doing it, you know, whatever, 10, 15 seconds here, you can see, maybe you can see, that my cabbage has gotten a little shiny. I don't know if that's coming through, but it's gone from looking a little ashy, just from being raw, to starting to get shiny. And I don't know if you can see it, but there's even more moisture on the plastic. And so that's what I'm doing it, is massaging it with the salt, and the cabbage is starting to release the moisture and make the brine that it'll ultimately ferment in. So I'm gonna keep going with this for a while and kick it over to Devin, who will talk about the Chow Chow.
So while we're massaging the cabbage for the sauerkraut, we're going to talk a bit about pickling and chow chow. And chow chow is something that I feel like maybe not a lot of folks outside of, you know, some of the southern states and maybe some of the southeastern states a bit know much about. But I'll get to chow chow in a second, but pickling is essentially a method of preserving food just by immersing it in some sort of acidic solution, and we're going to be using vinegar today. And what it does is it changes the texture, flavor, taste, and even the nutrient availability of certain foods that you're pickling in. And what we're doing when we are consuming fermented or pickled food is really introducing probiotics into our diet, creating a really healthy and diverse gut biome. And that really translates to our physical, mental, and emotional well-being. And so consuming these foods is really good for you, and, you know, dates back, you know, deep into all of our different cultures and backgrounds. And so chow chow is essentially, the best way to kind of describe it is like a hybrid between like a relish and a slaw. And it came about essentially from like taking some of your garden leftovers, or, you know, lots of things that you have, like, you know, kind of hanging around your garden towards the end of the season. And so there isn't really a standard to chow chow, and there's a lot of different origins around it that depend on like your culture or where you're located regionally. But we're going to be focusing on the southern version today, and the main ingredients in the southern version of chow chow vary from, you know, a cabbage base to, you know, almost exclusively hot peppers sometimes, corn, and also green tomatoes. Those are like typically like your main ingredients for that. And the level of sweetness can vary. Everybody has their own kind of, you know, preference to how sweet they want it. We're going to be making a more savory one today. And I definitely invite folks to play around with different vinegars, different sweetener levels. We're going to be using a white vinegar today. You can use apple cider, and that'll bring in a whole different kind of flavor profile to it. And yeah, so we're going to get started. So first, I'm going to show you how to cut some of the veggies, but while we're doing that, I'm going to get, if you look to your recipes, the 4 cups of white vinegar. And I'm just going to get that in the pot and begin to simmer it. So I'm going to turn that on. I'm going to put it on the high. And then once it gets a nice rolling boil, we're going to let it simmer. So I'm going to take the heat down to like maybe medium high. And so right now, I'm going to get all of your little seasonings that we had in your little plastic containers that we had, the turmeric, what was this, coriander seed, the chili peppers. We have mustard seed. And I also, this is in the recipe, but if anybody has celery seeds, definitely add this to your seasoning mix. And I'm just going to dump these in here now as we're kind of prepping stuff. All right. And so what I'm going to do while we're putting this in too, the red peppers that you have, I'm just going to kind of crush these and put them right into the pot. And this is my mom here. She's helping cook and stir today. So we're gonna just pour these in here. I'm gonna just kind of tear these up a little bit. I tore the top off, the kind of leafy part. I'm just gonna let this sit in here and do its thing. Okay, so while that's going, I'm gonna show y'all how to cut a few things that we have here. Let me move this down. All right, perfect. So first, Heather showed you already how to cut the cabbage. Cut it in half, you can quarter it, and then you take out that really hard stem right there, right? That's gonna be a bit more bitter and tougher to eat. And then I'm gonna show you all how to first actually peel garlic. If anybody's ever used garlic raw, it's really delicious, really great. Ground garlic is really good for this recipe as well, but we're just gonna use some fresh ones since we have it at the store.
That's ginger.
Oh, am I saying garlic? This is ginger. We're using ginger. I do that all the time. I use those words interchangeably, and I should not because they have very different flavor profiles. But what I'm doing right here is I'm getting my spoon, and I'm just peeling the skin off of this, right? So you can use fresh ginger. You can use ground ginger. Whatever you really prefer, have access to. But it really kind of helps make the dish pop a bit, make your chow chow pop. So I'm just gonna, take a little nub off of it. Nothing too much. Ginger's a pretty powerful ingredient, so I don't want to use too much of it. So I got, about a finger nub size worth of ginger. I'm just gonna chop it into a few quick pieces. And I'm not gonna mince it because I want to pull this out later. I don't want this to sit in my jars later on. So I'm gonna add this in there.
Devin, somebody asked the question. They said, did you put all of the dry spices into the pot?
Put all of your dried spices into the pot and just get it simmering for now. And I'm just going to show you how to cut a few veggies while that's going on the heat. So you guys can watch your pot and make sure you're stirring as often as you can just to kind of make sure everything's fully immersed in there. And what I'm also going to do is, while that's going, I'm going to be adding the salt and sugar. And so we need 3 tablespoons of salt. You can go to your bags, get 3 tablespoons of that in there. You're gonna get half a cup of sugar. Let me grab that. All right, and I think actually this should be a perfect half a cup that you have in your bag. So you can just pour the whole bag in. I'm just gonna pour that into the pot right now. All right, so while that's going, I'm gonna show you all how to cut your collards and your bell pepper really quickly. So I'm gonna cut the top off of the bell pepper, like so. And I'm also gonna cut the bottom off like this, right? And what I have left is the top and bottom open like that. I peel this back, take out some of the pith, and then I cut right on the side like that. Open it up, take out whatever pith or things that I don't want in there. Maybe save some seeds for your garden later. We've sprouted a few over here. And all you do is flip it around and start cutting down. In my experience, a lot of folks always had trouble cutting bell pepper, and so this is a really simple, easy way to do it. If you keep going along, you get these strips. To make them as thick as you'd like. You line them up. You start cutting down. And that's essentially how you get a nice diced bell pepper. And so for the chow chow really can go on anything. And you want to think about what you want to use it for. And so for some toppings, you might want a really small pieces for your chow, right? But maybe if you're using it as like a side dish, I might use like bigger chunks of cabbage, bigger chunks of bell pepper, whatever it is. And so for this one, we're gonna make them mid-sized. We don't want them too big, but we don't want them too small either. And we're gonna do the same thing for the collard greens. Most folks don't put collard greens in the chow chow. I think that, you know, collard greens just grow so much, and sometimes you just have too much to deal with, and so you're looking for things to do with them. And so right now we have some expo greens from our farm. These are baby collards, so they're going to be a lot more tender, which is going to be perfect for this. For folks who haven't cut collard greens before, what you can do is you can layer them up. When they're bigger, it's a lot easier to do this, but you layer them up like this, and you roll it like a sushi roll, right? Until you have something that looks like this. And what I'm gonna do is maybe make some 1/4 inch size cuts all the way through. Some people say remove the stems. For a dish like chow chow, you don't want just the leaves. You want a good bite, right? And so what I do is I keep the stems in there, and I actually cut all the way down to the bottom of the stem right before the that end of it. And what I'm gonna do here too is, you know, if I'm making collard greens in like a stew, I want those long strands, but I don't really want that for my chow chow. If I want to put this on a sandwich or something like that, I don't want super long strings. And so after I've cut it like that and I have that roll, I'm just gonna get my knife and cut it one more time down the middle, so that they're kind of broken up like this. And that is how you cut some of the more important pieces of chow chow right there. All right, and next we're going to get into the veggies. And hopefully everybody saw the email that we sent out. One thing that we do with chow chow is to prepare for it is salt the veggies either overnight or at least 4 hours in advance. And what that does is it helps take some of the moisture out of our collards, our cabbage, bell peppers, green tomatoes, all the kind of maybe more water heavy things that we have in our dishes. It takes out some of that moisture, so it makes it a bit more crispy. And we did a dry salt bath just because that really helps it make it more crispy. Some folks use salt brine. And what that does is it kind of softens it a bit more. So if you want a softer chow chow, I'll put it in salt and water overnight. But if you want a crispier chow chow, just use the salt over the veggies. And I don't know if you all can see, but there's a little bit of liquid that's been collecting at the bottom over time. So what we're gonna do now is take our veggies that have been sitting over there. Thank you, Mama. All right. And I'm gonna put this in my sink. Can you all see that? Yes, I'll take the top ramen out. And we're gonna get our veggies and we're gonna just gently wash them. All right, real gently. Take some of that out. You could use a strainer for this, but I'm just gonna kind of pour it out on the side. Move this out the way. All right. So we're gonna pour out all the excess water that you have that's collected overnight or the last 4 hours. We're gonna move it back over here. And my mom has been working over here on our brine.
Devin, somebody asked how much salt did you sprinkle over the veggies when you left them sitting?
You know, I just kind of eyeballed it. Not so much that you were just like covered in salt and coated in salt, but I took a few, maybe like for the size of the recipe that we had today, I would use maybe 5 or 6 pretty hefty pinches of salt, just so it's fully immersed in there. So maybe I'd say
about a tablespoon,
a quarter cup to a half a cup, something, probably like a quarter of a cup for veggies and stuff that we use today. Yeah. So what we have here that you can see is our nice brine. You can see it's really picked up a lot of the color. And we're just gonna add our veggie right into here. And I can already feel how tender they've kind of become. And this is gonna be particularly great for things like cauliflower, which we have in this recipe as well. And what I did too is instead of using big chunks of garlic in here, I minced them up really well because I always love like a little kind of garlicky finish in your chow chow. A nice good bite of that. All right, so all of that is in there. And now I'm going to mix this all in here. And while I'm doing that, I believe, Heather, I'm gonna pass it over your way.
Yeah.
We're gonna mix this for about 10 to 15 minutes. The longer it sits, the softer it gets. So it's your choice on how long you want it in here. So make a note of the time once it starts to simmer, and then wait 10 to 15 minutes. And Heather, I think we got your bit.
Okay, great. All right, thanks, Devin. That looks delish. All right, so maybe some folks saw me before. I was massaging this for a long time. My hands got tired, but I'll give you a bit of a look now, and you can see that liquid, that beautiful purple liquid that's gathered there, and that is my brine. And this will continue to pull liquid out. Some more of it will continue to develop, and the longer I mash it, and I'll see here if I can get the camera a little closer. So now you can see as I do it, the juice, the liquid coming up out of my fingers. Okay, so this is the time when if you wanted to add any other seasoning to your sauerkraut, you could do that. Today we're just gonna do it straight, plain cabbage. I like a really simple sauerkraut, but you could add shredded ginger in here. Take the peeled ginger just like Devin was doing and then grate it so it's really grated up, and then mix a little bit in here and it would give it that nice gingery zing. You could add caraway seed is a really popular thing traditionally to add into sauerkraut, and you could just put, for this amount, you would put in maybe a tablespoon. You could also put in fennel seeds. You could put in some diced garlic if you like, or even some chilies. And those you could either dice them or you could slice them really thin, and they would ferment along with the cabbage. So again, it's just really a preference of what you're looking for flavor-wise. Okay, so once this is done and I've got my brine, you're gonna package this up or put it in a container so it can continue to ferment. And the container that we're gonna use here, we have these really big, beautiful glass jars. I'm gonna lift that up a little. These really nice, beautiful glass jars. You don't have to do it in this large of a jar. You can get some really good size, even like those 32-ounce wide mouth ball jars or mason jars they sell at the grocery store are a good option. Or if you have, this is a good opportunity to save like big old pickle jars if you buy pickles, or if you're getting like mayonnaise in a glass jar. Things hardly come in glass anymore, but you want a good sized jar. Now this one, the other thing you'll really notice is how much it shrunk. This really shrunk. So for a jar like this, I would aim to have it not all the way full to the top because you want to have some air, some head space, but you know, maybe about 3/4 of the way. And based on this, I could maybe do maybe 2 or 3 heads of cabbage. That would get me to about the 5 pounds. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is go ahead and put this cabbage in the jar. And first I'm scooping up the cabbage. If I was adding any of the seeds or any of those things, I would have done it in the bowl, mixed, or you know, ginger or garlic or anything. I would have done it in the bowl, mixed it all up really well, and then be putting it all in there together. I'm putting this in here. It's a little messy, but that's all right. If you're using a smaller jar, if you're going to be doing much canning, whether it's pickling, making jams, fermentation, any of those things, they sell these little kits. Like, and you can get tons and tons of products online, but they also sell these simple kits like at the grocery store in the aisle where they sell jars, and they have funnels that fit the jar as well, and all kinds of different little tools that are helpful. Now, I want to say a little bit about the salt. The salt that we used today was sea salt, and we use a natural sea salt that doesn't have any agents in it to prevent caking. We're not using like table salt. You could also use like a kosher salt, which is often like a rock salt. But you know, just regular sea salt is a good option. It's affordable and pretty accessible at grocery stores, and that's what's in your bags today. But you don't want to be using kind of standard table salt, iodine salt, because it has additives to it. It has anti-caking agents and other things. And so you don't want to be using that. Okay, so if you come down here, you can see now I've got this in here, and I've got, lift that up a bit. You can see the liquid down there at the bottom. And what I'm trying to do, what I want to do is have the liquid actually be higher than the cabbage. And that is going to continue to develop, and that will happen in these early hours of working on it. So you see I'm packing it down. Again, if you look online, there's a lot of resources around fermentation. They will try to sell you really fancy crocks, these wooden mashers to mash down your cabbage or vegetables so that they're below the water line. Those things are nice to have, but it's not necessary. You don't, our people long before us, generations and such long before us, they did these things without fancy tools and expensive kits that you could order online, just with jars that they found, crocks that they had in their hands, and you can do that too. Sorry, just if there was a question. Okay, so you see I've packed this all down, and you want the liquid level to be higher, and right now it's about even, kind of almost the same level. The liquid is up there and it's going to keep getting higher. You want the level of it to be higher because you want the vegetable to be below the water level so that it's completely submerged in the fermenting brine and doing its business down there. And because any bit that sticks out could potentially grow, bad bacteria, mold or yeast or something like that. So you want it to be below the water level. And you're going to use some kind of method to weigh it down because naturally it wants to expand, especially as it starts to ferment. There'll be bubbles and things in there, and it wants to expand and it wants to float up. And you want to keep pushing it down. So I'm going to go back. Remember those leaves that we saved at the beginning? I'm going to use those again. Again, you can use all different kinds of things to weigh down your vegetables. They sell really fancy things that kind of go in the jar and expand and let air out, but still hold your veggies down. They sell these kind of nice glass heavy weights. They're called like fermenting weights. It's like a glass disc. It looks like a paperweight kind of, and you can drop it in there. You could use stones actually. If you have a nice smooth stone, boil it to sterilize it. You could use nice heavy stones in there. I'm going to use this cabbage leaf. I've kind of pulled it a bit so it's similar in size to my jar. Get it down in there. Got it down in there. And I'm going to use that as my top layer to weigh it down. And already, look at this, you can see how even this little bit of sitting, you see all that liquid? And when I push it down, it's already going, making a little pool on top of that top layer. Okay, so I'm going to use that to weigh it down. And then I'm going to use this ball jar. So I just got a big jar. I made sure ahead of time that the circumference of this jar fits inside this one. And so whatever size jar you're using, you can use, just make sure it's going to fit. And I went ahead and I filled this one with pie weights. Anybody who bakes, those little ceramic weights that you use to hold down your pie dough when you're baking that. But you could fill this with marbles. You could fill it with water. You could fill it with pebbles. Just something to get it good and heavy. You don't have to go buy pie weights. Use whatever recycled plastic glass jar you have and put something heavy in it. All right, so I've weighed this down and I sterilized this jar ahead of time. So this jar is clean. And I put it down in here. And that is gonna kind of press down that leaf. And that leaf is holding everything else down. You see that? Okay. All right, and that's it. And now it needs to sit. So what I'm gonna do, I'll cover the top of this with a paper towel, put a rubber band around it so no dust or dirt gets inside. And I'm gonna set this at kind of a temperate location in the kitchen, something around, 70 degrees, kind of like the average temperature, maybe in your kitchen, not in a super hot space, not in a super cold space. You want to put it under a window or anything like that. And how long you let it sit is really a matter of taste and preference. But I would say at a minimum, you want to do maybe at a minimum 3 to 5 days, but you could go 10 days to 2 weeks. You just want to keep an eye on it. You want to be sure that it's below the water level. You can always press it down. You could come in and figure out maybe adding some more weights if that's something you needed to do. After this sits for a couple hours, I'll see that my water level is getting higher. If for whatever reason it seems like I don't have enough brine and my cabbage isn't covered, maybe my cabbage just wasn't producing enough moisture, I could make a little bit extra brine if needed. You would just do the ratio of 1 teaspoon of salt to 1 cup of water. And you would use a warm water, hot water, let that salt dissolve, and then you could add it into here just enough so that your stuff is covered. About a ½ inch head space, between the cabbage and the top of your liquid is a good amount. So you could add that in. But even though I don't have that head space yet, I feel pretty confident that I'm going to get it. And like I said, over the next couple hours, it'll continue to develop. So I'll add that, maybe later tonight or tomorrow if I feel like I need it.
Hey, Heather.
Yeah.
We've got a question from Sandra. And the question is, when making yogurt, there's some sort of starter for sauerkraut and chow. Where does the probiotic and good bacteria come from?
Yeah, so the probiotic and the good bacteria are coming from the liquid that's being produced by the vegetables and the natural sugars that are in there, and that balance with the salt in that natural brine. And over time, it actually creates its own bacteria. And so while we do often, like even on yogurts, you'll use starters, but you could use a little bit of other yogurt, you just have to introduce it. But in this case with the vegetables, they will produce theirs, from the sugars and that are in the vegetable itself. Okay, so I'm gonna leave these to sit. Now I just wanna say one more thing before we kick it back to Devin about what it's gonna look like. Over time, it should have sauerkraut, like a pleasant sour odor. You might get a little bit of a white kind of granular kind of layer on that. That's like a yeast layer that could develop on your sauerkraut. It's not bad for you. You can scoop that off. You might also find that little pieces of cabbage and things that pop up might even grow a little bit of mold on them, and that can be pink or white or black even. And if you're very careful, the yeast or those molds, you can remove them very carefully, being sure you get all of it out, and your sauerkraut below might still be fine. How you would determine that is once you remove all that stuff, give it a taste, give it a smell. It should have, again, it would be sour, but the taste and the odor should be pleasant. If there's any question, you can dump it and start over. But it's not, so you have to kind of figure out your own comfort level with that. But just to know, just because you see those things doesn't necessarily mean that the whole batch is shot. But if you remove it, you want to be sure you get all of it, that you scoop all of it out very well, that you remove it from the side of the jar, all of that. And then, a little taste isn't going to hurt you. You can taste it. And you'll be okay. I see there's a question here about, does it produce more probiotics the longer it sits? Yes, it does. The probiotic count is going to go up the longer it sits. The kind of fermented sour flavor is going to intensify the longer it sits. And the cabbage itself, or whatever vegetable it is you're fermenting in here, is going to get more tender the longer it sits. So you'll let this sit for as long as you like, and along the way, after 3-4 days, you can taste it. You can keep tasting it and let it keep going. But once you decide it's done, you could keep it, take all the weights out, do all of that. You could keep it in your big jar, or you could transfer it to smaller jars. And then you can put it in your fridge. Or if you wanted, you could water bath can it. And we'll talk a bit about water bath canning in a minute, once Devin goes back to show us the final stages of his chow.
Yep. All right. Let me switch back over. Can everybody see that? All right, perfect. So what we have left now for the folks who've been cooking is something that should look like this. The cauliflower should be tender, so you can get like a fork, for example. Let me get one out. And if you see your ginger in here, see if you could pull it out. Otherwise, you're gonna notice a pretty hefty piece of ginger once you start eating it. And you can just pull that out yourself. You don't want to take a bite of that. But yeah, the turmeric has turned into this really beautiful yellowish green color that is gorgeous. The cauliflower should be tender, like so. And what we're gonna do now, while it's still hot, I took it off the heat. I only had it in there for about 10 minutes. And that's because I kind of like a crispier chow chow. And what I'm going to do is I'm first just going to have a wide mouth mason jar right here. And there's lots of ways you can load it in, but I'm just going to spoon it in like so. Right, adding it in there. And we want to be mindful of, again, like Heather mentioned, leaving a good amount of headspace in here. What I'm going to be doing for my dish is just a quick refrigerator pickle. And I love refrigerator pickles just because, especially for folks who are new to pickling and fermenting, it's a little less intense of a process just in terms of making sure you get that perfect seal and everything's clean with your jars. You definitely want to use clean jars still, but it's just a quicker, nice, easy way to still get the similar effect. It just won't hold as long. So we're making refrigerator pickle chow chow, and this is going to hold for a few weeks. And I like to do it this way just because chow chow is something that can be used literally as a topping to anything. And so I like to make, dishes or meals that have multiple uses. And so chow chow is that. And so I plan to be eating this throughout the week before it even has a chance to spoil, right? So I'm literally just going to pack all that in there like so. And what this is missing, I'd say personally, I'd love to add like quite a bit more hot peppers. And that's just because of my taste. This is a pretty toned down version of chow chow, but I will say once you begin to pickle the peppers a bit, you lose some of that heat and the peppers really start to transform into a whole other thing. So that's why I also love to use like quite a bit of hot peppers in chow chow. Jalapenos are always good. If you don't want as much heat, you can get like a banana pepper. Serrano peppers are great. Lots of different ones. And if you're really hot one, maybe like some chili peppers or something in there. So you want to fill it up about that height. You see kind of like right where the lip of the jar is right here. And as you can see, when I press down, there's all those juices in there. And so I don't want to just put the veggies right into there without any juices. So as you're loading, press down, put a spoon on there, press down to see if any juices come right up. If they do, then you're good. If it's still pretty dry, then get a funnel like so and pour some of your brine into it. Perfect. Oh, it's all good. It's all juicy in there, yeah. So yeah, get this, get your seal or get your lid. Move this out the way and just put it on nice and tight. So again, refrigerator pickles, you want to be careful holding on to this. This jar is going to be hot. Refrigerator pickles are going to hold again for only a few weeks. Heather is going to talk a bit more about the actual canning process where you fully seal your jars, and you can preserve your food for anywhere up to a few weeks to in some cases a few years. So Heather.
Great, thanks, Devin. So water bath canning is a really simple way to do it at home. You don't have to have a pressure canner, just a nice big pot, and then a couple of these tools like I mentioned. This is a jar grabber, the ones you can get in the canning section at the grocery store. So once you would have your chow chow in the pot, or you would have your sauerkraut in the jar and it would be done and ready for canning, you can first thing you want to do is sterilize your jars. I would take this big pot of water, bring it to a good vigorous boil, And then I'm going to lower my jar into the water. You want to be really careful as you do that, because as the jar fills with water and goes down, it'll splash. So really take your time. You can also sterilize your jars in your dishwasher. Some dishwashers have a sterilization function, and you could use that as well. So once they sterilize, they only need to boil for about 5 minutes. They're nice and clean. Again, I would use my tongs. I would come out, dump out that good hot water, and here's my jar. Now I've got a hot jar, and in Devin's case, he has hot chow chow. And so hot glass and hot dishes can go together. If I have, you want to be careful though about like putting hot food in a cold jar or cold food in a hot jar, because that glass will break. So in this case, it just came out of being sterilized. It's hot, his dish is hot, so it can be loaded in there. You would fill it about to that curve in the jar right here. And you would be sure that there's enough liquid in there, probably more liquid than Devin is going to do in his refrigerator, because you're preserving this. So you want your liquid to cover the chow chow completely. And so maybe your chow chow would come to about here, and then your liquid would come up above that. And you still have a good ½ inch before the top of your jar. And then you can use your different kind of lids. So we have the ring lids that you get. You put your top on and you twist it, so what they say is finger tight. So it should be just tight enough, got this jar here, just tight enough that it's like with your fingertips, that it's kind of snug, not full palm squeeze, right? You just want it finger tight. And then you would have your hot jar with your hot chow chow, boiling water, grab it like this and lower it down in there. You need to have the top tight enough where water's not going to get in, but that as the product inside heats, that air can escape so the seal can be made. And then you would let it boil for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then pull it out with your tongs and set it to cool. And as it cools, and it can take as much as 24 hours to do it, the button would be depressed, and that's how you know that your product has sealed. If it doesn't seal, then you can always just pop it in the fridge and use it like a refrigerated product. But if it does seal, then you're good, and you can use and store that for up to a year. Now you can use that kind of canning process with sauerkraut if you like, although sauerkraut will keep once it's finished in a clean jar in your refrigerator for up to a year. So you don't have to can it. And that you do need to know that if you can sauerkraut, that the process of boiling it to seal it is going to kill some of the probiotic microorganisms that are in the sauerkraut. So it's something you can do if you absolutely need to have it be shelf stable and you're concerned about that. But with sauerkraut and fermented foods, it's not ideal. Better that you just put it into, once it's finished, put it into clean jars, cap it, and put it in the fridge. And those probiotics will continue to multiply and be alive and be there for you when you eat the food. I see a question there from Mar about having potentially added too much salt. She said she used 2 tablespoons. It's really a matter of taste. It may not be too much, but if you feel like you've got enough brine, you have so much brine that you could add more to it, you could add, she said, Brussels sprouts or kale. You could add all those things. And because they have a thick kind of texture, somewhat similar to the cabbage, they're going to have a similar texture as they soften and ferment.
There's actually 2 questions as well in the chat.
What other veggies do you like to, if you like to ferment? I like to really ferment red onions. We do that here at the VMP. If folks have come in and gotten our sandwiches or our salads, we do the fermented red onions a lot, and that's a really nice thing to have in your fridge all the time. It's great on sandwiches, it's great on salads, it just has a really, hamburgers if you're grilling in the summer, it just really brings out the flavor. Carrots, pickles, all kinds of things. It's just really your preference.
Great.
I saw someone said I like to add carrots to my sauerkraut.
What are the most I may have missed it. What other popular dishes can we use this with?
It's great on sandwiches. It's great as like a little side dish. Like if you're having kind of a heavier meal that has maybe like a protein and a starch, like potato, steak and potatoes or chicken and rice or something like that. having a little bit of that sauerkraut on the sides and salad. I also like to put it on sandwiches. I like to put it on salads. I like to just eat it by itself. I think chow chow you can use a similar kind of way. Devin, how else do you like to eat the chow chow?
I love using chow chow. I mean, essentially, like you want to think of it as a mix between that relish or a slaw, like a coleslaw. And so anything that can utilize those dishes, it can either be a side, a condiment, or a main, is really great. I love making sandwiches, and so love putting chow chow in my sandwiches as some sort of kind of green that'll also make the sandwich kind of pop a bit more. Um, they're great on hot links. They're great with barbecue.
When you're doing the chow chow, if you could use balsamic vinegar.
I wouldn't. Yeah, I would stick to either a white vinegar, a white wine vinegar, or a apple cider. Rice vinegar could be used as well if you're looking for a kind of different flavor profile, and that actually would be really tasty. I tend to go more so for the kind of lighter vinegars, like a white or a wine vinegar. But apple cider, I'd say, is the other most commonly used one if you want a sweeter chow chow.
Thank you all so much for joining us for this Garden Gateway virtual class. Please follow us on social media at CSU Inc. on Instagram and Facebook /CSU Inc. on Facebook. And keep an eye on postings for future workshops. We're putting out gardening content and more cooking classes, so stay tuned on that. And check out our YouTube channel. If you just go to YouTube and you search Community Services Unlimited, you'll find our channel, and we're putting all of our virtual cooking workshops and virtual gardening workshops are being posted there. And please take pictures of what you do, post it online, send us some emails, share with us what you're doing. We want to see what you're making in your kitchens. Thank you all so much. Have a great day.